Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Michael, it is now Halloween.
Good morning.
Of 2025.
It is.
Yeah, boo to you. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, by the way. We will have our 3-year-old and 2-year-old granddaughters at our house helping to hand out candy. They'll first tour about 10 houses, and then they'll be at our house handing out treats.
It's so much fun when they're that young, they completely buy into it.
They are a blast. Yeah, they really are.
Their imaginations are fully invoked.
Yes.
You know, my daughter was always afraid of animated characters because she, at a young age, had difficulty discerning between reality and imagination.
Okay.
She didn't like Santa. She didn't like the Easter Bunny. You know, it was very interesting to try to see the world through her eyes and her confusion between these animated characters and real people.
Well, a funny story along those lines is my son-in-law dressed up like the Grinch. And I mean had the great outfit, the green arms, the green light, and the Grinch head.
Very convincing.
Yes, and comes around the corner, and our 3-year-old, Charlotte, the 3-year-old, looked up. I mean, she was scared.
Right.
And then he pulled the head off right away.
Yeah.
And then everything was okay, but it's
same thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. It's got a lot of ways. You know, there's people in New York who kind of feel the same way about Mamdani, but we'll see. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
But you sent an article to me that I found fascinating, and it's written by Jeffrey Tucker, who's a wonderful writer.
Right.
The slaughter of the sparrows under Maoist China, and what it talks about in 1958. China was ruled by Mao Zedong, and predictably, in communist societies, they have a very, very difficult time growing enough food to feed the population because there's no market, there's no incentives. People are commanded to do this and commanded to do that, and it doesn't work out the way that the experts thought that it would work out. And then their only way to fix that is usually to use some kind of heavy hand. And so Mao gathered together his experts and said, okay, what are the reasons that we have this famine? And they came up with, they said that there are 4 things that cause famine: rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. And so the experts concluded there wasn't much they could do about the population of rats, flies, and mosquitoes. But they did conclude that they could do a lot to reduce the population of sparrows, because they said sparrows would fly in and they would eat the food before it was harvested. And so if we could reduce the population of sparrows, there would be more food to harvest. That was the logic. And so what they did was they told the population of China, and especially those in the rural areas, to get pots and pans, and if they saw sparrows, to bang the pots and pans together to scare the sparrows so that the sparrows would stay airborne. And apparently if a sparrow stays airborne for too long, it loses its ability to fly. It gets exhausted, loses its ability to fly, and doesn't land softly. It drops and dies.
Okay.
And so there were millions of sparrows that were eliminated or killed in this manner. And
this really happened. It's not a fairy tale. It sounds like a children's book.
It does. This actually happened. And but then what the experts hadn't factored in is that sparrows ate locusts, and that the locust as a result of destroying over half the sparrow population, the locust population exploded. And locusts multiply much faster than sparrows, and they ate much more of the food before it was harvested than the sparrows ever consumed. And as a result, the Great Famine of China, it killed 45 million people. and then led to the Cultural Revolution, because the people, when there was mass starvation, the people became very disturbed, and Mao, in order to protect his regime, then invoked the Cultural Revolution, where he would jail or execute millions of political dissidents, and a political dissident was anybody who was upset by his policies. And
I think I've heard that he also went after anybody with glasses because he reasoned they were intelligent enough to form some opposition.
Interesting.
I think that's right.
Okay, well, it would make sense. It would make sense given the extreme measures that they went to. But the lessons in this are kind of interesting, and that is that when the experts concluded that you could grow food by eliminating the sparrow population, they hadn't thought through what the unintended consequences would be from their action. And when government experts are given the power to enact a very broad policy that it's driven only by an idea, but not confirmed by the market, then the law of unintended consequences can become much, much bigger. So if somebody decides to invest in what turns out to be a bad idea, they didn't make the investment because they knew it was a bad idea. It just turned out to be a bad idea. The damage is limited to the amount of that investment.
You know, one of the best books I ever read is called The Wisdom of Crowds by a guy named James Surowiecki, Surowiecki, Polish name. Really brilliant. And he starts out with a county fair in England where they guess the number of black and white pebbles in a jar. And they give it to the person who's closest, right? Well, you get a bell curve distribution as you have individuals because nobody knows,
right.
You know, and they make errors in both directions.
Right.
But collectively, they produce a bell curve that is really quite predictive.
Right. Right.
Okay? And
or
so
quite accurate.
It's accurate in its prediction.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's good. And the point of this is we now have prediction markets online where people go in and they bet on what they think is going to happen. They turn out to be quite accurate in predicting elections, social events, cultural developments. And it's because collectively our errors cancel each other. At least that's the theory that's offered about why this works. But the point is when you have markets, when you have voters, you have a check against this wayward arrogance of people that think they know what's happening and they don't. They don't have the information. There was a Nobel Prize issued to, as James Buchanan, I think was his name. He had come from Middle Tennessee here. Basically, he was an acolyte of Friedrich Hayek, who wrote the Road to Serfdom. Yep. And basically, the Road to Serfdom is this conceit that you know how everything works and you're going to control it.
Right.
You basically leave it to markets. You leave it to democracy to discover what works.
Yes, but and the most recent Nobel Prize was awarded to three economists who to me, I like to say that they proved the obvious, and that is that innovation comes from places that you cannot predetermine, and that innovation must happen if you're going to have increases in productivity. You must have increases in productivity to increase the standard of living.
Yeah, and so you and I have said that over and over.
Yes.
But let's put this in terms that are more favorable to those winners than to us, which is that we think that's true, but we can't prove it.
And these guys,
it's intuitively true. What they did is they used the economic models that the profession uses. Then they put in logic and math that said this quantitatively is proven that this is the way innovation works.
A lot of real data.
Yes.
And what I'm saying, a lot of real data showing the amount of innovation, the amount of patents that are filed, and then taking that and mapping it to, okay, here's a society where there are lots of patents filed, lots of innovation, lots of freedom to file patents, and did that result in higher levels of productivity? Did that result in higher standards of living? And that's what they did. They proved it over a period of like 150 years. And so it's not like
they didn't live that long. You mean that they studied a period of time? Yeah.
Yeah, their data went back. And so
you know, we believe a lot of things that are not necessarily true. We think they're true, but they're not proven. This is what's interesting. A lot of them probably are true, but then which are the ones that we don't know? There's this. We're going to get into this about unknown unknowns, things we haven't discovered yet. Let me make one point about that. When I started my career at Procter & Gamble, we did test markets. There were propositions that we were testing. Does this work? We think that'll work, et cetera. But a big piece of it was, what are unanticipated events from this? What have we not discovered? And it was very explicitly in the test to be alert to what we weren't expecting. And that's missing in some of these stories that we're telling. People think they have a model of how everything works, and they've missed something important, like in the sparrow story.
Yes, and in our own country, when the federal government determines that and this is true, this has been going on for my adult lifetime. In the late 70s, there were all these economic things that the government did that led to tremendous inflation. There was legislation in place that said that what was at that time called the savings and loan industry, that it existed under statute to loan money for mortgages.
Yes.
And so it would loan money out for 30 years at, say, 4 or 5% mortgages. It would then pay interest of, say, 3% to depositors. And those organizations were chartered to do only that. And then you had this terrible inflation in the late 70s and early 80s, and the depositors who had their money at these savings and loans at 3 or 4%, who were free to withdraw their deposits and put them someplace where they could get a 10% interest rate, did so. The problem was the savings and loans had loaned their money for 30 years. So they had no way to generate the cash to pay off the deposits because there was, quote, a run on the entire savings and loan industry. So then Congress, the experts, got together in 1981 and passed what was called the tax, something about, it was a big, long name that changed the tax code but gave extreme levels of depreciation on real property, and it deregulated the savings and loan industry and said you can loan money on any real estate you want to. Doesn't have to be just homes. It can be apartments. It can be shopping centers. It can be office buildings. It can be warehouses, anything. And if you're an investor in any of those, not homes, but any of the others, you can get this incredible rate of depreciation. And so what happened was there was a huge demand by investors, not by the market, to build apartments, office buildings, shopping centers.
Because the tax advantages.
The tax advantages.
Yeah.
And so we overbuilt.
They weren't economically good projects. They were just tax mechanisms.
Yes. And so there was vast amounts of money invested in these projects, and then they reversed the policies in 1987, and all of these limited partnerships imploded, and we went for maybe 5 or 6 years after that, where, for example, in Nashville, Tennessee, in 1986, there were 20,000 apartment units under construction in Nashville, Tennessee. As of 1988, they were all completed, and not a new apartment, not a single unit was built for another 8 years. It took 8 years to absorb what was built because of the tax code. And this was experts. This was experts saying we need to do this, and it was a vast change, not a little change. And so you can, experts, even in a quote free market economy like the United States, the experts can make decisions that bring tremendous turmoil.
Yes.
2008 and 9, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and this is for people who are perhaps a little bit too young to remember those times, or weren't paying as much attention.
Those are quasi-government entities that buy the mortgages from the first lender.
Yes,
right. So they consolidate all of the errors that are made in those original mortgages.
Yes, but they were encouraged by the government, and this was by Republicans and Democrats alike in 2008, 9, and 10, to make, because the idea, the experts believed that owning a home was a good thing for anyone because home values always went up.
Yeah, and we covered this pretty extensively in a prior podcast.
Yes.
We're kind of in the weeds here in the details. What I would say is that we should be skeptical of what some have called the men of system. which are people that think they know how the system works. They're going to rethink it and rationalize it, and everything's going to work beautifully because they're so smart.
Well,
What comes to mind is Hillary Clinton saying she was going to reimagine healthcare.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes.
People are not smart enough to do these things. And, there have been Nobel prizes issued to, I think it was Buchanan, who said that the price system is what gives us the information. This is, again, Friedrich Hayek had the same teaching, that is where we get the information about how things are valuable, not by logic, not by law, statutes, and systems.
It's price and profit. Profit helps the capital markets know where to allocate more money.
Right. If you're making a lot of money, I'm going to invest in that.
I'm going to invest in that.
Compete a little bit of that away. I'm going to take some of it.
Right. So at any rate, I thought that story in China. So now I'm going to take that, and we're going to talk a little bit about the mayor's race in New York, which the betting markets say as of yesterday, Polymarket said that Mamdani has a 93% chance of becoming the next mayor of New York.
So let's unpack that just a bit. Polymarket is an online betting forum where you actually put your money up, predicting what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? It's like betting on horses.
Yeah.
Except it's on culture.
No, this is...
You're betting on real money on an outcome.
Yes.
Okay, is what I'm saying. And the point is that it behaves like we were talking about earlier. The wisdom of crowds tends to be quite accurate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, especially in these political bets because there's so much information that's available.
Yeah, and you have everybody with their own piece of information entering the market. The same way free markets work.
Yes.
All of that counters one another, and it tends to get an accurate result.
Yeah. And so at any rate, Robert Reich, you sent me this article. Robert Reich, who was the labor secretary under, I think Bill Clinton had him as labor secretary.
I believe that's right.
And President Clinton, and then he might have done some work for Obama. But anyway, he is a very, very left-leaning economist.
Yes.
And he's very well spoken,
even though articulate. He speaks with great precision that makes him sound very intelligent.
And he's very calm.
Yeah.
And so he can say things that are completely illogical, but he says them in such a way as to say, "Wow, I didn't know that. That's wonderful." And so I'm going to read just a couple of short little paragraphs because he is a huge Mamdani fan. He is a huge Mamdani fan.
Well, he thinks it's giving energy to the left, and he likes that. I think that's why he's a big fan.
He thinks this is the future of the Democrat Party.
Yes.
And it may be, by the way.
Yes.
I'm not saying that part's wrong. But here's what he says about Mamdani. He's proposing a few easy-to-understand things. Free buses, free child care, a 4-year rent freeze for about 2 million residents, and a $30 minimum wage. He's aiming to do what Franklin D. Roosevelt did in the 1930s, fix it. You may not agree with all of his proposals. I don't. But they're understandable. And if they don't work, I expect that, like FDR, he will try something else. Now, here's what's also...
Read the next paragraph.
Okay. The clincher for me is that he's inspiring a new generation of young people. He's got them excited about politics. My 17-year-old granddaughter is spending her weekends knocking on doors for him, as are her friends.
Yeah, so it's energizing some portion of the left, which he is excited about. We're going to get into the merits of this.
But he's also talking about, I want to read one more thing before we get into it, and that is he's attaching to Mamdani the way that AOC and Bernie Sanders politic. And then he says, what do these people have in common? They're authentic. They're passionate. They care about real people. They want to make America fairer. They advocate practical solutions that people can understand. Now, that's the type of thing that he will say, and you sit there and listen to him. So you sit there and listen to him, and you say, wow, boy, that makes so much sense.
Well, it reminds me of the story you tell about going to the conference and someone said it's going to be a inflation. You said, I got to prepare. And then the next guy said it's going to be a depression. I got to prepare. And from that, you realized that you were rootless. You had no defense against these very persuasive arguments. And I would argue that's what's going on here. There are people that, especially young people, who have not been educated well enough to be able to defend themselves against these so
let's unpack this.
What's the right word for that? I'll think of it later. But,
okay. Let's just unpack this just a little bit. One of the things is free buses. Now, I've actually heard a clip where Mamdani says the reason buses should be free is that charging people money to get on a bus creates a great deal of tension. And he says there are people who get on a bus who can afford to ride the bus much more easily than other people, and that alone creates tension. And therefore, in order for the buses to be better used and to be safer, then we need to eliminate the tension, which means eliminate the need to pay money to get on the bus, because that process alone, according to Mamdani, creates tension.
We can't have tension. We can't have tension, and so let's get rid of the tension. First of all, there's nothing there that's free. They're basically reassigning who pays.
No, just hold on. For the people who get on the bus, it's free.
It's free. I'm saying somebody's got to pay the bill.
I
you
get
can't
that.
just wave your hands and make things cost nothing.
We're going to get to that in just a second,
okay.
But I want to try to get into, okay, so if buses are free in the wintertime when it's cold and the bus itself is warm and there's a nice place to sit or a place to sit, who are the people who are most likely to get on the free bus?
Homeless people.
Would it be the homeless people?
Yeah.
There are subway cars where the homeless have figured out how to get on and they live in the subways.
Well, we have that problem here in Nashville with libraries.
Yeah. Okay. I did not know that. So
yeah.
So the homeless go into the libraries in the wintertime and just occupy the library.
Yeah. They pretend to be looking at the computer.
Okay. And they just take over.
Yeah.
Okay. So but the homeless population in New York is substantial. So if they get and it's likely under Mamdani to frankly get larger. But if they get on the buses and occupy the buses, and there's 20 or 30 homeless people on each bus, will the other people get on those very buses?
They're less likely
Less
to.
likely to.
Far less likely to,
Yeah.
I would say.
But here's the question. If causing people to pay money creates tension, then why not extend that? He talks about city-run grocery stores, but he hasn't said the food will be free. But wouldn't it naturally follow that
it would reduce a lot of tension if food were just free?
Yeah, wouldn't that logically follow?
Well, we have some of that logic in healthcare. There's a lot of healthcare today that's provided basically free. Mm-hmm. You go in, you get it taken care of, and somebody else pays. You have no idea how much it costs.
Yeah, and that's true. But if the food is free, then why would anybody? What would happen to the shelves, the store shelves?
Well, they'd be like they were in the Soviet Union. They were empty.
Yeah, or in Kansas City, where they had a city-run store, and they lost close to $30 million in that store in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
in one store, and the shelves eventually were empty, and they had to close the store. And so, what's interesting about this is the way that the left, and Robert Reich is a well-spoken, not well-credentialed person of the left who is essentially advocating that everything be free. Now, before we started the podcast today,
he would not say that. We're saying the logic of his positions here implies that a very broad swath of things should be free.
Yes,
he didn't make that claim in those words, but the logical implication of what he said, we're claiming, is that,
or forcing the price to be lower than it otherwise would be, which is when he says there would be a 4-year freeze on 2 million apartments.
Right, which is taking money out of the hands of landlords, so they can't reinvest in the buildings. They'll be crappy buildings.
Well, and also it discourages anybody from building a new building.
Sure, yeah.
And so there will be, if there is a shortage of housing in New York now, the shortage will only get bigger.
Yeah, there are some landlords that just close up their buildings.
Right.
Because they can't run them at a profit, and why keep losing money? They just close it. And so the supply goes down, and the demand-supply ratio changes further. There's less supply, so prices go up.
And then he also says a $30 minimum wage. Well, in California passed a minimum wage for fast food restaurants of $20 an hour in fast food restaurants.
Right.
That was passed about 2 years ago.
It's very good for the kiosk business.
Well, as of today, 80% of fast food restaurants in California have reduced the number of employees that they have, and the average price above the national average over the last 2 years has gone up 15%, the average price of the food. And so the minimum wage that they're being forced to pay is doing two things. It's reducing the number of people who are getting the previous wage because it's reducing the number of employees in a fast food restaurant. Mm-hmm. And the other is it's increasing the price to the consumer. Now, this is not something that the people who are the proponents of the $20 wage argued would happen. In fact, they denied that it would happen.
Yes.
But they passed it anyway. And so these things are going to be interesting. But the biggest thing that he said, the biggest thing that Robert Reich said that I think is fascinating is that he said that Roosevelt fixed the Depression. And there are a lot of people who think that Roosevelt fixed the Depression, and that is false. Roosevelt did not fix the Depression. The Second World War fixed the Depression because we had another terrible depression in 37 and 38.
So the first one began around 32.
32.
Yes.
And Roosevelt did two things in those 6 years. He dramatically increased taxes on everybody, but especially higher income people. And he dramatically increased government spending.
A lot of make-work programs.
Yes. And a lot of
people that were unemployed, he put them to work doing things that otherwise nobody would have paid for.
In some cases, he paid people to rake leaves from one side of an area to the other and then rake them back. So in other words, they were literally paid to do something that generated no economic gain at all.
Yeah.
But he wanted them to be employed. And so he believed that if you spent money and hired people, that it would get you out of the Depression. That's what he believed, and that's what he did. Now, in order to pay those people and increase the government spending, he had to raise taxes. And so he raised taxes on the top marginal tax rate initially went from 25% to 68%. By the time we got into the Second World War, the top marginal tax rate got as high as 94%. But the average person's taxes went from 10% to 35% during that period of time, and we had another depression in 37 and 38.
Let me extend this and to test an idea with you. This idea has continued that government stimulus has a multiplying effect, and whatever it spends has a lot of benefits to the economy. Mm-hmm. So through most of the rest of the 20th century, we had what they called Keynesian economics, where the government always had an incentive to spend to make things bigger and better.
Right, to borrow and spend.
Well, I was going to say, since Reagan came in and he reduced taxes and the economy spurted, it bloomed with lower tax rates. Now we have some limits on tax. It's harder to raise taxes. We don't have 50 and 70% tax rates. We just borrow the money instead.
Well, actually, we do both. I'm going to push back a bit.
Okay.
The top marginal tax rate at the federal level is in the high 30s. But if you live in New York or California, where the tax rates are 15 and 16%,
on top of that,
then the tax rates do get above 50%.
50, yes.
And so when you hear people on the left say all we need to do is raise taxes on the billionaires, first of all, there's 900 billionaires in the United States. That's how many there are.
I think that's wrong. I think I just saw an article in the Wall Street Journal, and there's like a couple thousand of them.
Okay, all right.
But it's not that many people.
It's a relatively small number.
Right.
And to tax them, you'd have to tax their wealth, not their income.
Yes.
Because they don't make their income, while their wealth is substantial, their income is not. And let me explain that just a bit. If you are a founder of a startup company that becomes worth, I'm picking an easy number, $100 billion, and you own, as the founder, you ultimately own 5% of that company, then your worth is $5 billion.
Yes.
But if you don't sell your shares, then you're not paying tax.
Right.
So they would have to either force you to sell your shares, or they would just simply put a tax on your $5 billion. And now gets back to the sparrows. That has all kinds of unintended consequences. If you start taxing wealth.
Yeah, they can't pay it because they don't have current income to pay it, so they have to sell off something.
And then who buys it? That's the key.
Yeah.
If people are forced to sell, who's going to buy?
Right.
Because I'm not going to buy something if I'm going to be forced to pay taxes. And so now the market collapses, and all these IRAs,
meaning the value of that is much lower than it was.
Yes.
When you say the market collapses, people don't want that asset because it's a burden.
Right. And so these are the things that the electorate is debating and tangling with right now. And in New York, it looks like that the voters are going to elect somebody who is the closest thing to a dictator, an economic dictator, because he is claiming, I'm going to do these things. Now, the city council.
You say the electorate is debating these things. I would say it's doing so very poorly. And I would further say it's because there is enormous ignorance about how these effects that we're talking about today. People think you just wave your hand and say, let's going to have $30 minimum wages, and it just appears.
Yeah. Now, Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, said, and so she's giving a speech or she's answering a question. I don't remember which, but she made the statement. She said, higher taxes bring economic wealth. She said, right now the tax rates in Brazil are much higher than the United States. And she said, quote, Brazil is growing like crazy. Okay? So what I did was I went and did a search. I said, what's the average income of a person who lives in Brazil in U.S. dollars? The answer is $3,600 a year. That's the average income. I then went and said, what's the average income of a person living in the United States? And the answer is $66,000. That's what the search results showed. And so Kathy Hochul is the governor of New York, and she is advocating that we have policies that result in $3,600 in average income versus $66,000. It's the ignorance of the experts. I'm going back to the sparrows. The ignorance of the experts is breathtaking, Mike, and it scares me to death.
So the question that occurs to me, is she really that ignorant, or is she using this for a political end that she very well knows what she's doing and that it's not accurate, but it gets an end that she wants?
Okay, now let me.
Neither one is a good outcome.
Does it matter? Does it change the outcome? Yeah. If she gets what she wants, whether she did it intentionally, knowing that what she was doing was terrible, or she's so ignorant that she thinks what she's doing is good.
Well, you get the same outcome, but you also have very different recipes for how to fix it. If somebody's really that ignorant, that points to education and a bunch of other things. If they're not ignorant but just manipulative, maybe other tactics.
That's a very good point, because what it does is it says something about the corruptness of the individual. Either they do it out of ignorance, which is you can fix that and it's forgivable, or they did it out of knowledge and it was intentional. Yeah. That's a very interesting point.
Yes. That's why I'm here, Crom.
Yes, thank you. Which leads us to kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about, and that is this is a headline about forget the auto pen fiasco. This is Joe Biden's Watergate. In fact, it's worse.
So the auto pen fiasco is people who are saying there were a lot of actions late in Biden's term that were signed by AutoPen, and did he even really know it was happening?
Yeah, well, some of it was late, and some of it was the last two whole years. Yeah. There were policies that were executive orders that were signed with the AutoPen. That there's some people who say that Biden didn't even know what the executive order was.
Yes, and what do you do? And so is that a big scandal, and what gets undone? I think probably nothing will get undone. The pardons will stand, and we just move on. But what this article is saying that is a ripple on a pond. There's a much bigger scandal that is emerging.
Yes, this scandal is called Arctic Freeze. And what was going on during the Biden administration was under Jack Smith, he went to
independent
prosecutor, and who was appointed by Merrick Garland,
the Attorney General.
He went to a Judge Bozeman, in Washington, and he got that one judge to give him the authority to subpoena records on, according to this article, to give him the authority to to subpoena records on 197 subpoenas, and these subpoenas were issued to 34 individuals and $163 businesses, including financial institutions. And these 163 businesses included essentially every major Republican organization. It included the RNC. It included Turning Point. It included the Heritage Foundation. It included all kinds of organizations that are center
aligned,
right, that are center right or right, that are aligned with Republicans, including 9 U.S. senators.
But which is to say, they went to subpoena their phone records to look at who they were talking to.
And bank records. And then depending on who they were talking to, they could then subpoena that person's phone records and that person's bank records. So what they were trying to do is find out, they wanted to use the Justice Department and the FBI to find out who is funding organizations that by law have a right to keep their donors' names private.
And let's make a legal point here. I think in the law you have to have a premise. There's another word that
predicate.
A predicate. Yeah, it means I suspect something and I'm accusing them of a crime. I'm going to investigate whether they did it.
And not only that, I have to have some evidence to support the predicate.
Yeah,
not just I believe.
That is the predicate that we see evidence of a crime. We're going to investigate the crime.
Not I believe.
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
There's evidence that you did it, and they believe that they're looking. In this case, there's no predicate.
There's no predicate.
They're just searching for what they can find to undo. It's kind of like by the way, after 9/11, they couldn't after the fact they couldn't act as they could before. So if you put together all these phone records and you see the way terrorists are communicating, you might uncover a plot before they do it.
Yeah, but 9/11 happened.
It did, and that's why they did laws that allowed more of this kind of searching within limits.
And that's the key point.
Yeah,
there were limits on that, but what Jack Smith has done and Grassley would not have known this had it not been for whistleblowers.
So he is a senior senator. He's been there a long time. He's
head
Republican.
He's head of an important committee, and I don't remember which one, but it's a committee that would have jurisdiction as a senator.
Right, and he's investigating this.
Yes, but here's the question. Comey has been indicted for lying to Congress.
The former head of the FBI.
Yes, for lying to Congress.
Yes.
Okay, and lying to Congress is a crime.
Yes.
So whether or not he's guilty of that will be determined, but he's been indicted for that. John Brennan has been at least referred to the Justice. He was the
head of the CIA at the same time Comey was head of the FBI.
He's at least been referred to the Justice Department by a House committee claiming they say Brennan lied to our committee. So they've referred that. But here's my question. So we could agree that lying to Congress is against the law and is a crime. We can agree that that is true because it's on the books. But my question to you is, Michael, if a judge abuses his or her position by issuing subpoenas to give the government the authority to investigate whatever they want to, especially their political opponents, is it possible for the judge in his or her position to be committing a criminal act as an abuse of power of their position? Is that possible?
I think in our system, the remedy for that is impeachment, which is a political process. What I don't know is there's some legal process to charge him with a crime and then have him a defendant in a lawsuit. I think probably not, but I don't know.
Okay. I'm going to push back a bit here, and that is that if you are, other than the President of the United States, because there's very specific language that protects the President of the United States from criminal convictions during their time as president.
Right.
They can still be indicted afterwards for criminal acts that they committed while
after
they were
leave
president.
office.
Yeah, but if somebody in the administration who is not the president commits a criminal act,
they can be prosecuted.
They can be prosecuted.
Yeah.
So my question, and a member of Congress who commits a political act, who commits a crime while they are a member of Congress, they can be prosecuted. The question is, can a judge be prosecuted for abuse of power?
Well, now I wish I had gone to law school and maybe I could answer that. I can't.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
But that's to me is if a corrupt if and this is true regardless of the administration, but if an administration can find a friendly judge and go and ask that friendly judge to give them carte blanche, whatever they want, to investigate and essentially attack their political opponents through lawfare and through investigation and through intimidation, if a judge is allowed to do that, and the only remedy is impeachment, that's the only risk that the judge has. The judges have a frightening amount of power.
Yeah. And combine that with the notion of a national injunction, where you have a district judge somewhere, say in the middle of California, who issues a judgment that binds everybody in the country.
Now, but let me say this about that. Quoting Jack Kennedy.
I know that was Nixon. I think it was Nixon that did
Nixon
that.
said that? Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, it was some president.
Yes.
That can be overturned by an appellate court because it's public.
Yes.
Signing a secret subpoena, which is by its nature secret.
Yes.
Can't be overturned because it can't be taken to a higher court. So there is a distinction between a judge who misrules and is overturned and a judge who gives a political party carte blanche to attack its political adversaries.
Yeah, and so a lot of it in the executive branch, this scandal that we're talking about, is not even discovered until another regime comes in and starts looking at the records. Most people don't even know about it. I shouldn't say nobody, but it's not public.
The only ones who did know about it were the ones who were doing it. Nobody else did. Yeah. These 9 senators did not know they were being investigated. And Mike, what's interesting is it took a whistleblower. It took somebody inside the administration once Trump won. It took somebody inside the Biden administration who went to Grassley and said, let me tell you what the previous administration was doing, and here's the receipts.
Yeah, and they may have waited until there's a new regime because maybe that's not so dangerous to them.
Sure.
Not only for their career, but maybe personally, and you might end up in a car accident.
Yeah. So anyway, so that is something. If that doesn't go anywhere, then the question is
you mean the investigation of the Arctic freeze?
Yes, and if
is it Arctic what?
Arctic freeze.
Arctic freeze scandal.
And if the people who committed these acts by going to a judge and getting the authority from the judge to do all these things that to me are completely anti-American and anti-democratic in the sense of of the way our government is supposed to work. They're illegal. To me, they are patently illegal.
Well, they should be illegal. I think that's what I hear you saying. Are they illegal is the question I'm asking.
And if they are not, does that mean it's okay to do it?
Well, and here's where you see Trump now going after Letitia James and who else is it?
Comey?
James, because
Brennan,
they did it to him, and I think he's just finally said, F it. They did this to me. I'm going to do it to them, and we're going to get this out in the open. He's probably on a little shaky ground for some of what he's going after these guys for, but I think he's making a point that this is the way our government works. And we have to have the same rules for both sides.
Right. And now that gets into the fundamental point, is that for a society to be governed properly, there must be equal treatment under the law. Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, everybody says no one is above the law. Equal treatment under the law. And that's why I ask the question of if a judge uses his position or her position, in this case it's a him, to give one administration the authority to wreak havoc on its political adversaries in secret.
Yeah.
It's not even in the public.
Well, I mean, this is banana republic kind of stuff because it's routine in less stable, less mature governments for the new one to criminalize the old one, throw them all in jail.
Yeah.
And to criminalize policy differences. That's another aspect of this.
Well,
what is a policy difference and what is against the law? I should point out, I think Boasberg, you mentioned the judge in question here, is also the same guy that was ruling on one of the immigrants who there was a plane load of immigrants that was on the way to Central America. He told them to turn the plane around. You remember that?
Right.
Basically, he told the executive branch how to operate.
Yes. Now, here's the difference to me between that and Arctic freeze, and that is Boasberg was overturned. by a higher court for a bad ruling. So
on the immigrant plane?
On the immigrant.
And it was pretty quick, right?
Very quick.
A few days.
Yeah. And so what I'm saying is if a judge issues a public ruling that can be appealed, if a lower court judge issues a public ruling that can
There's
be
a
appealed,
material difference there.
It can be overturned quickly. If a judge gives the Justice Department and the FBI the authority to investigate its political adversaries, that's not public knowledge. It cannot be overturned.
Yeah, fair enough. So important differences. My point is it's the same guy that's finding it within his power and his purview and to do these things that are very partisan and possibly illegal.
Well, and if they are illegal, this is what I was trying to get to, and then we're going to move on.
All right.
If they are illegal, if you first if the judge must be impeached, then you have to get 67 senators to impeach him. And if what he's doing is acting as a political hack and giving one side vast authority, then the senators
on that side are
unlikely to impeach him. So that means
nothing happens.
And so that, to me, that means, okay, then that must be okay.
That's the way the rules work.
That's the way the rules work. So Republicans would find a friendly judge to then allow them to do the same thing. And that's a terrible way for a country to operate. But a more terrible way would be if one side can do it and the other side doesn't. Yeah. And that's what Trump is essentially saying, is if lawfare is going to be used against me and 100 people in my administration, and it was at least 100 where lawfare was used, then Trump is saying, if that's the way it's going to be, those must be the rules. I'm going to have the rules applied the same way.
Right.
And I think that's unfortunate. Not that Trump is doing it. I think that both are unfortunate. Exactly what the remedy is, I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. But I do.
There's an old saying that two wrongs don't make a right. But in this case, how do you get to right if you allow wrong to continue to perpetuate without challenge?
Yeah. And this gets to, and I'm kind of just using to get to another subject here. But when Giuliani became mayor of New York, he implemented what he called his broken glass theory. And that was that if you arrest people for small crimes, then the big crimes will also shrink in numbers also.
Yeah, so you arrest people for spraying graffiti, for breaking windows, literally. So it's called the broken windows theory. For jumping turnstiles.
Yes.
If you catch them at that stage, they don't do the big. It's like enforcing rules against marijuana because it's a gateway drug to more serious things.
Yeah, and that one is a great example. And so so one theory is if marijuana is illegal and people use it and you arrest them and there's a significant penalty,
right? Then
fewer people will smoke marijuana. That's the theory,
right?
And I think that logic supports that theory, and I think that facts certainly supported Giuliani's theories.
Yeah, well, again, we've seen with the sparrows that logic can lead us very far astray. So the question is, what works? You test the policy, and in Giuliani's case in New York, in the 80s, 90s,
yeah,
it worked.
Yeah,
beautifully. Their crime rates went way down. And part of it was neighborhood policing, where the police got to know those people, and they knew who was most at risk. They watched them carefully, and there was a relational effect.
Yeah, and one of the things that Giuliani did was in New York it was illegal to carry a gun unless you had a permit to carry, and they arrested a lot of people who were illegally carrying guns, and that reduced the murder rate.
Yes,
because people knew if they had a gun and the police would stop them, talk to them, and frisk them, and arrest them if they were carrying a gun illegally.
Yeah,
and the left hated that, but it did dramatically reduce the violent crime rate.
Back to the question we were just asking: do you have to have a predicate to think that somebody has a gun, or they're going to use it, or do you just frisk everybody? It's kind of what's going on with ICE now. You have the idea that they're arresting specific criminals, the worst of the worst, et cetera. Then you have other people that think they're just running through anybody that's at a Home Depot waiting for a part-time job, which is it? Do they have a predicate or do they not? There's a lot of ambiguity and contention.
Yeah.
Tension. And Mamdani maybe just make it all free and tension would go away.
Well, yeah, and that's the free meaning in terms of the immigration issue.
Yeah.
For the left, they believe that people who are here illegally, and that is criminal to cross the border illegally, they don't believe it's a crime.
Yeah.
And they don't believe it ought to be treated as a crime, even though it is a crime. And they had time to pass legislation to change whether or not it was a crime or not, and they didn't.
Yeah.
So now that the law is being enforced, the left is and many of the reasons that the left likes illegal immigrants to stay is because of the way that our census was done in 2020 and the way they would like for the census to be done in 2030, and that is the census in 2020 counted everyone in a state, including the illegal immigrants. And that determines how much federal funds you get for the state. It determines how many House seats that state gets. And then the legislature of those states can then apportion or do the gerrymandering or whatever to determine what the districts will be.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's step back for a second because we had an episode on gerrymandering, and I did a bunch of research. And if you recall, what I found was most of the states are already gerrymandered. There's not a whole lot. You see it now in Virginia and some other states that are trying to push it a little further toward the margins. But the right states have gerrymandered it to the right and the left to the left, and it kind of washes out. That was the conclusion that we had. But the big thing that's out there is immigration, internal movement of people from blue states to red states. And I think it's estimated that 5 or 10 seats will change from blue to red because of depopulating California, New York, I think Illinois maybe, but especially they're going to Texas and Florida and red states.
And Tennessee.
Yeah. And so what we're talking about now, though, is a layer above that. This has to do with corruption in the census.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us about that. What happened in 2020 and how will that be affected in 2030?
In 2020, before the census was taken, Trump told Wilbur somebody or other.
Wilbur Ross?
Yeah, Wilbur Ross, who was head of the Commerce Department, which oversees the census, told Wilbur Ross to not count illegal immigrants in doing the census. A lawsuit was filed, and the Supreme Court ruled that there's a process that needs to be followed in order to make that change, and that it was too late.
They had not done the process, so it was illegitimate. You couldn't change the rules.
So they did count. So two things. One, they did count everyone, including illegal immigrants, but there also was an algorithm that was used because they didn't count everyone. They count a certain number. They used an algorithm to determine what that meant. That algorithm, it turns out, was tilted toward blue states to give them a greater population than what the actual count probably would have been had the entire count been done. So now there are two things about the 2028 election that have to do with this issue. One is if the number of illegal immigrants is smaller because of deportation, then that automatically reduces the count. The other is if the algorithm is changed so as not to do the same result.
Not to imply the presence of immigrants that then further
that could be an additional 20 House seats. And so the 2028 election is important not just because of policy, but because of power.
And so the census is in 2030. Let's talk about how this applies to 2028. I think Trump is trying to advance the census to make it occur before 2030.
He's trying to do it before 2028.
Yeah, he would try to do it in 2027.
He's trying to do a new census. Whether or not that will pass the courts, pass muster, we don't know.
But there's a clear reason he wants to do it because he wants to apply the 2028 elections.
Correct. And if he succeeds, then the 2028 election will not be as important on this issue.
It won't reflect those changes, but the 2032...
No. The 2028 election would if Trump is successful.
I'm saying, but if he's not successful, there won't be that effect, or there will be much less effect, if any.
In the 2028 election.
Yeah, but 2030 I guess 2032 would be the one that's most affected.
Correct.
2030 was probably too early to reflect.
Correct. And it is the administration that oversees the census, not the Congress.
Oh.
And so whoever is president in 2028, if Trump doesn't get to do a new census before 2028, whoever's president, whichever party controls the White House, will have a great deal to say about what is included in the census. So that's why these elections are so important, because of the way that each side views it.
I think we can say that here again, this is logic as opposed to experiment. But I think a lot of the animus toward ICE on the left comes from their realization that addressing this illegal immigrant disempowers them.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So they're fighting like hell to avoid that disempowerment. Imagine how hard they're going to fight in the 2028 election to get their hands back on the steering wheel to address it in the census.
Yeah. Now, to this point, here's a headline here. Mamdani gets 62% of foreign-born New Yorker votes. Now, these are people who live in New York who are now citizens, but they are foreign-born. Mamdani is getting 62% of that vote. And
I think presumably most of those people weren't educated here.
Correct. Or they didn't receive a high quality education.
Either here or there.
Either here or there.
Yeah.
And this gets into what we've talked about on previous podcasts about culture. And that is, America has a culture that is different from all of the other cultures in the world, including European culture. It's similar to European cultures, but it's very different from many of the other cultures. And so that's where the question of, is immigration good for the citizens of this country? And that we've talked about that in the past, that in my question to anybody who says we need to have as many immigrants as possible, my question to any of those people is, every country south of our border purports to be a democracy. Which one would you like to be more like? Which of those countries? Because if you allow 30 or 40 million people from those countries into the U.S. and they get to vote, our country will end up being more like those countries. Which one do we want to emulate? Kathy Hochul says Brazil.
I have a friend who is a retired Vanderbilt professor, a world-class historian. He's English and I think maybe Israeli as well. But he has just passed his test to become a U.S. citizen.
Okay. And
we went and celebrated with him a few weeks ago. But he had to study for the test he was doing. There's like 100 questions, and then there's 20, and they ask you 5. And it's different if you're a certain age, so it's more complicated than I can remember. But the questions are not easy. It's not what colors the flag. It's what does the 14th Amendment say, or what are the principles in the Bill of Rights? He, as a retired professor, studied for this because he didn't want to trip up. Okay, that's what I'm. And the point is, this should be the standard that's being applied to every legal immigrant. Is it being? I don't know.
Yeah.
What we just said suggests maybe not.
Yeah.
But certainly for illegal people, illegal immigrants, they've never taken a test like that.
Yeah.
They don't have any standard to meet in terms of their knowledge of and allegiance to our political system.
Right, and yet they still count. Now, there's the so I want to have one last subject, and that is, as of today, the government shutdown is still in force. You now have the largest government employee union calling for the Democrats to reopen the government, because the fact is the House has passed a continuing resolution, a clean continuing resolution.
Meaning it doesn't have a lot of partisan riders that reimpose a bunch of...
Has none.
Yeah.
It just says we're going to continue to spend as we have been spending without anything that was added new.
There's one exception. They were authorizing some money for security for people in Congress.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair point.
After the Charlie Kirk assassination is widely recognized.
It wasn't partisan though.
Yes,
it went for everybody.
That's right.
And so the Democrats have claimed Their argument is, no, we're going to shut down the government until the Trump administration and the Republicans agree to what we want in next year's budget. We're going to force them to agree to certain things. And Republicans have said, we'll negotiate with you over the budget, but we're not going to do it with a, quote, gun to our head, unquote. And so we're still shut down as of today. You now have private sector labor unions demanding that the government be reopened and demanding that the Democrats vote in favor of the continuing resolution. The scuttlebutt that I hear is that next week after the elections,
Tuesday elections in Virginia and New Jersey.
Yeah, in Virginia and New Jersey, and there are other elections.
But those two have gotten a lot of attention.
Mamdani
in New York,
the mayor of Minneapolis, which is a fascinating case there, where you have a very, very liberal mayor who is now going to be, looks like, defeated by a even more left-wing immigrant from Somalia.
Yes.
And but the word what I read is that the Democrats after the election will reopen the government.
They'll vote for? I haven't heard any of this.
They'll vote for the CR. They'll kicking and screaming, but they'll agree to it.
Yeah.
And then so that part will be done. And if that is true, then our next podcast we can then talk about, in terms of federal spending and whatnot, we can talk about the budget that is then supposed to be passed between now and Christmas. That will be an actual budget, not a continuing resolution.
Yeah, and so the time is so short for that. You know, the purpose of the continuing resolution 30 days ago was to preserve the status quo so they could get to work on a more permanent budget. Now they've wasted 30 days.
Apparently, according to Mike Johnson, I saw an interview. He said the committees—
Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Yes, the Speaker of the House says the committees are still doing their work.
Okay.
So I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
So if that is accurate, that they're still doing their work, then it's not going to be a full 30-day delay.
Okay.
And that there will be a budget that's gone through regular order. Apparently there'll be, if the government gets reopened between now and Christmas, there will be a budget for fiscal year 2026 that is passed through regular order. And that budget does not require 60 in the Senate. It requires a majority.
That's the key.
Yes.
That's the key. Because I was going to say, why are we not back in the same soup? Because that budget only requires a majority.
And I knew you were going to ask that, which is why I went ahead.
You were so preemptive and brilliant in doing so. I am gutted.
Well, so anyway, Mike, I've enjoyed today.
It's great.
And we kind of wandered around a bit, but that sparrow story.
Well, there's some really important points in here about how we know what we think we know.
Yes.
I just am inclined to this branch of philosophy. It's called epistemology. How do we know?
Yeah.
And we believe a lot of things, but we really don't know until we go try them out.
Yes.
And get the results. And so experimentation and innovation is where we end up with that. Decentralized government, where you have lots of experiments going on, and instead of a lot of centralization where people declare how things are going to work well, and then they're wrong and we're bad.
Yeah. And so, so anyway, I enjoy these every week, and hope our listeners do too. Thanks so much.
Okay.